Good evening. This is Kathleen Mallory, Planning and Sustainability Manager with the City of Oxnard. This evening, I'll be giving an update regarding cannabis in the City of Oxnard. For background, in November of 2016, the state of California adopted the Adult Use Medical Act. It passed by the voters. Then in November of 2018, there was a general ballot measure approving taxing of all types of cannabis within the City of Oxnard. In October of 2018, City Council provided direction regarding the number and conceptual locations for dispensaries, or as we call it, retail cannabis operators. In that October direction, Council also provided conceptual approval to the location and number of manufacturing, distribution, testing laboratories, and cultivation opportunities within the city. And since 2018, we've been working on preparation of ordinances to regulate the types of cannabis uses that I mentioned, including the retail, which I'll focus on in my presentation tonight, along with manufacturing and distribution, which I'll touch on as well. In December of 2019, the City Council granted final approval of conceptual retail locations for cannabis within the city. In December of 2019, the manufacturing and distribution cannabis operators and locations were selected, and I'll focus a few slides on those locations and operators as well. And then in October of 2020, the City Council approved a local equity program. Within that local equity program, the action was to impose a one-time payment of cannabis operators, $25,000 for manufacturing and distribution operators, $250,000 for retail cannabis applicants or operators, and $50,000 for cannabis cultivation and testing laboratories. In addition to requiring one-time payments, the second component of the local equity program involved a yearly 1% gross revenue donation to the City of Oxnard, and that money goes directly to the city's general fund. And finally, the third component of the local equity program is a local hire requirement. For retail dispensaries and manufacturing operators, there's a 75% local hire requirement that would be local within the City of Oxnard proper boundaries, 50% local hire requirement for cannabis cultivators, and then there is no local hire requirement for cannabis distributors or testing operators. In that action in December of 2020, the council gave direction on how to use that 1% gross, gave direction on how the one-time payments could be utilized. With that one-time payment, the decision was made by council that $500,000 would go to the general fund to restore recreation and senior service programs that had previously been cut due to budget issues, and then also to approve earmarking the 1% one-time donation of improvements for the Colonia Multi-Service Center building, which needed a variety of repairs. In December of 2020, Council also authorized staff to prepare a cultivation ordinance and to increase the number of retail cannabis operators from 10 to 13 and adding an additional 3 for local retail applicants. So a total of 16 retail applicants were permitted, of which 3 are required to be local residents. And that means that ownership of those 3 retail dispensaries needs to be comprised of at least 40% ownership of a Oxnard resident, and that would be the current city boundaries at the time of ordinance adoption. In March of this year, the city manager selected 16 retail dispensary cannabis applicants and granted approval for them to apply for a permit, and that was after a very involved solicitation and interview process. So the next step for the retail cannabis operators is to secure a special use permit. The ordinance requires that those 16 applicants apply for and obtain approval of a special use permit by March 1st of 2022. Those applicants, those 16 selected retail applicants, have been advised that they need to secure the special use permit by that date. Through our discussions with those selected cannabis operators, we've encouraged them to engage with the designated neighborhood council, which is located either immediately adjacent to their potential dispensary location or is in charge or overseeing how do I say that? Or for which they're located in that neighborhood. The ordinance calls for a review and renewal of the special use permit every year. There's not a hearing required, but robust conditions are will be imposed on those dispensaries. And through that evaluation of how that operator is doing, we'll evaluate condition compliance and if they're dealing with the conditions and responding to any issues that may come up from the police department, if any. There are requirements contained within the ordinance that specifies requirements to deal with signage or loitering. There'll be, the ordinance includes requirements regarding lighting and security, and those would then be placed as conditions of approval on the permit. So every year there will be a review of the 16 operators to ensure that they're complying with the conditions of approval. And should they not be, the permit process would be reviewed by the city manager. This slide just graphically shows the type of cannabis business and then the number of permits that are ultimately supported by council through the cannabis ordinance. In terms of this slide, this is just a quick update on where we're at with manufacturing and distribution. As I mentioned, the prospective manufacturing companies and distribution companies and locations, we gave a conceptual approval to those businesses back in December of 2019. What that means is those applicants, we say, yes, you're a good potential operator. Now you need to apply for something called a Development Design Review Permit, or a DDR permit. This indicates of the applicants that we've said, yes, you can apply. This is the status of them. In terms of by color coding, you'll see this on the following slide. So on the northerly portion of the city, we've approved 2 distributors and manufacturers. So we've got one under review right now on the easterly side of the city. That's a manufacturing and distribution applicant. That's the on the east side of the city, the blue and the green. Then southerly, we have a pending manufacturing applicant. The one that is the red, that is sort of west of Eastman Drive, that is has been approved as a manufacturer. And then we've approved the manufacturing and distribution, which is located west of Beacon Place. So back on March 1st, 2021, the city manager selected the 16 cannabis operators and authorized those applicants to apply for a special use permit. What that means is that they have to secure approval by the Planning Commission of that special use permit within 1 year. One thing I wanted to call your attention to is that is not a typo in the number 14, 18, and 19. As mentioned, council gave approval for 3 local equity applicants, and that is the ranking of the overall number of cannabis operators that were interviewed. So those 3 local equity applicants were selected, and for example, the 19th, 99 High Tide was the 19th in the ranking. So that's, and the physical address for the various locations, I've got a map that I'll show you as well that walks through the location for all of these 16 prospective cannabis retail operators. So through the competitive interview and evaluation process, the interview committee focused on location, neighborhood compatibility, overall operations of the cannabis business, and how good of an operator they were, and really took into consideration how the plan was for the cannabis operator. Did the applicant, the prospective applicant, have a good grasp on cannabis and ways to ensure that the use would not negatively impact the neighborhood? And also, was the cannabis operator a strong, healthy operator that had good financial health and would be able to uphold the conditions of approval and ensure that they were going to meet the intent of our ordinance? Based upon that, you can see the various locations for the 16 cannabis operators. Some are located directly within neighborhoods, and actually you may have already heard from the prospective cannabis operator. As I mentioned, we did encourage the operators to reach out early and often to the neighborhood council. And for those applicants that are not located in a neighborhood council, we've asked them to reach out to the closest association and have that conversation with them. In terms of the next step, I can't stress enough that the direction in the ordinance requires that those retail cannabis applicants secure their special use permit by March 1st, 2022. And so you're going to be having proposals before your individual neighborhood councils. And we're happy to go and meet with those neighborhood council presidents and be a part of that conversation to give your neighborhood councils, your individual neighborhood councils, information regarding the cannabis process and to answer questions regarding the ordinance. Over the next 6 to 8 to 9 months, we'll be working on preparing a cannabis cultivation ordinance. As mentioned, we received council approval in December of last year to allow up to 2 indoor cannabis cultivators. I also want to note that we did go through the testing lab cannabis solicitation process 2 times, and we have not received any testing laboratory applicants. In terms of cultivation, this is the conceptual map that was approved by council. These are the areas that council gave conceptual approval for which for where to permit cannabis cultivation. The action was for those cultivators up to 2 to be indoor only, not outdoor cultivation, and that was with consideration to any potential smell and issues of theft, and to ensure that the cultivation operations had a controlled environment to deal with environmental issues. This map is really a summary of kind of where we're at. It was a collective of all the various types of cannabis permitting that we have gone through that I've talked about in this presentation. In terms of distribution, we have 2 of the cannabis distributors approved and 1 under review right now. Manufacturing, we have 3 approved of the 8 and 2 more under review. No local equity manufacturers were selected. Council may give direction in the future to go back out for another manufacturing solicitation, and that would then be isolated to just local equity applicants, since the 5 of the 8 slots are filled with selected manufacturers, as I mentioned. And then on the retail permits, currently we have 10 applications that have been filed of our overall 16, and that's of the non-equity or local equity applicants. All the applications have been submitted for the local equity applicants. So in total, we have 13 of the 16 retail cannabis applicants have already submitted and will be working on their special use permit between now and the time that we bring it forward to hearing, which could be 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, or sooner for those that have been submitted right after March 1st, when the city manager approved the 16 cannabis operators, the ranking on that. And then finally, we have one testing spot for cannabis. And as I mentioned, we have not had any applicants apply based upon 2 prior solicitations. So with that, this concludes my presentation. These are some helpful websites. The cannabis website is very robust, and the retail map that I showed you and the retail list that I showed you is also on that website, and along with my contact information. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.